All right, folks, let's start with civil rights tonight. And this is typically one of the more fun chapters that I do during the course of the semester. And it's fun because there are some elements to this that are incredibly serious. It's fun because there are some elements to this that are incredibly awkward. And it's fun because you kind of can think to yourself, wow, maybe some of these things have actually happened to me. And, maybe you didn't realize that it was that bad, or maybe you don't think it's that bad. And, the trick on this section, and let me make sure that I'm 100% clean on this. Oftentimes we say things we're a certain way, maybe if we're in a professional environment, maybe if we're in a classroom environment, but maybe we're actually a very different way if we have a couple of drinks, if we're around friends. And I think everybody knows that there's a difference. There's certain things that you can say around your friends, and maybe because y'all have a relationship, that in fact it's really not necessarily that bad. With that being said, though, sometimes you can say the same thing and really not even intend on having a negative meaning behind it. But the fact is, it's not what you mean when you say something. But the trick is how other people actually take it. And if others take it wrong, this is the kind of thing that can get you in trouble in the classroom. This is the kind of thing that can get you in trouble on the job. This is the kind of thing that can get you in trouble in social situations, maybe more formal social situations. So think about that. What you say, you may not have the wrong intention. You may not have any intention. You might just be genuinely trying to be polite or make conversation. But the fact is that if people take it in a way that's negative, that actually means that there is a chance that you could get some paperwork or some discipline, depending upon if this is a work environment, if this is a social environment, if this is a formal environment, whatever it actually might be. So kind of keep that thought in mind as we keep going. It's not what you mean. It's not how the majority will take something that is said, but in fact, it's how each individual person takes it. And it's not crazy that there could be, I don't know, 20 people in a meeting room and 19 of them take it fine. But the one person that doesn't take it fine would be the thing that could actually potentially cause you some trouble. As we get started with civil rights, y'all, and I'll go ahead and kind of recap for just a second. We talked about the difference between civil liberties and civil rights. And I want you to understand on this again. Civil liberties are things that government, they just can't abridge. The Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of press, right to bear arms, these kinds of things, no cruel and unusual punishment. The idea is that the founders wrote these things down in a Bill of Rights to make absolute sure that government would not violate or abridge these rights. Civil rights are a little bit different. Civil rights are basically going to be dealing with the idea that everybody is going to be treated the same. Everybody is going to be equal before the law. And it is government's responsibility now to make sure, in fact, that there is no unequal treatment. So in civil liberties, government is specifically not acting to make sure that we have certain rights and privileges. Well, in civil rights, government is specifically acting to make sure that everybody is going to be treated the same. Now, where I'm going to start with this is I'm actually going to start with political correctness and microaggressions, and we're going to build up into some court cases. But as I give you some of these examples, I want you to think about your own lives. Now, we've been talking a little bit about your group identification. And I've said on a couple of occasions now that I'm just a middle-aged white guy. So I identify with race, with gender, with age. But it's not crazy that people could actually, identify in a number of different categories. So when we talk about this idea of civil rights, the idea is that it shouldn't matter who or what you are. It shouldn't matter what your group identification or group identifications, plural, what these are. What matters is that everybody is going to be treated the same before the law. Now, what you'll see though is we kind of know, right? We kind of know that there are certain things that we're not supposed to say. And maybe these are about particular group identifications. Or let me put it another way. As a member of a group identification, isn't it safe to say that there are certain words that if somebody says these things describing you, that in fact you might get pissed off? Well, the idea here is when you talk about this idea of political correctness, or the more modern word microaggressions, is that sometimes people say things. Sometimes people say things, y'all, and maybe they don't mean it to be negative. Maybe they do. We may not know until it's too late. But the idea is that there are certain things that we either know or probably should know that we shouldn't say about other groups. Just shouldn't be. Maybe these are stereotypes. Maybe these are generalizations. Maybe these are just ignorance speaking, this kind of a thing. But the idea is that we know that there are certain things that you're not supposed to say because it's not the politically correct thing to do, or it could be interpreted as a microaggression. Now, let me say this. Microaggression is a new word, and it may have already passed, its lifespan. Because if you say something that somebody takes wrong and you didn't mean it that way, you're not going to think it's an aggression. Well, if somebody says something that you take wrong, you're not going to want to refer to it as micro because it's not going to be micro to you because it aggravated you. It bothered you. And I bring this up. Microaggression is one of these words that doesn't satisfy people on either side. Because there are going to be people that aren't going to think it's an aggression. And there are sure as hell going to be people that aren't going to think things that were said, generalizations that were made, were actually micro. Let me give you some examples of this. Y'all, we talk oftentimes about things like race and things like gender and some of the elements of discrimination that are out there. Let me show you a few examples of some political correctness slash microaggressions. And I want you to think about these because these really happened. These are real articles. And this led to a number of problems. Let me juggle my screens here and let me pop this up. And as I pop this up to you, this is actually a series of little blurbs from a magazine that's called The Week magazine that I use. And you notice on these, all of these would probably be maybe the length of your thumb, even if you've got a small thumb. There's not that much here, but just think about some of these different kinds of examples of where people could potentially create a microaggression, or in fact, where people might say something that could be very, very unintentionally offensive. I'm going to zoom in on these a little bit and just kind of center these as we go. This first article, this is, golly, 15 years old now. This is from Iowa. Now, I'm getting older. I need to start thinking about things like this. But evidently, Iowa had a department that dealt specifically with services for older Iowan. They called it the Department of Elder Affairs. Department of Elder Affairs. They decided that calling someone elder was inappropriate. So they changed the name to the Department of Aging. I don't know if that feels all that much friendly or not. I mean, I'm getting old. I know I'm getting old. Other people are going to be able to see I'm getting old. Some of y'all even wrote in that Young Sember video that I posted how much younger I looked back then. Well, I give this to you. The Department of Aging, maybe it sounds a little better, but at the end of the day, we're still old going to get these services. But here's the thing. If you send somebody to a government agency, people don't keep saying it out loud over and over again. Well, we're going to send you to the Department of Aging. No, they're going to abbreviate it. Take this paperwork and go to the DOA. Hmm. I don't know if any of y'all have ever heard of the term DOA before, but believe it or not, it's a medical term and it means dead on arrival. Could you imagine they changed the name from the Department of Elder Affairs and they started sending old people to the DOA where they're dead on arrival? That ruffled some feathers. And I bring this up to you. It's kind of funny because it's really awkward and inappropriate, but it's not funny because it's really awkward and inappropriate. So understand as you look at this, race, gender, things like this, these are attributes that are out there. You can say some things that would be inappropriate about age too. Let me scroll over. I had never heard of this group when I first started using this article again about 15 years ago. We'll talk about this maybe a little bit later when we get into interest groups, but you'll notice up here the advocacy group Little People of America. Funny thing, when we talk about group identifications, and this is something that I learned years ago at an internship with the state legislature. The instructor said that power is something that's never given, but in fact, power is something that's got to be taken. Now, you can take power by winning an election, to be sure. You can take power, though, by organizing. And what you see is that a lot of groups today in the United States are recognizing their group identifications, maybe in some instances for the first time. And so now we've got a lot of different groups that are, in fact, demanding recognition and rights. This is pluralism. And you could argue that this is a good thing. You could also argue, though, that maybe sometimes this goes to a little bit of an extreme. And sometimes the system, when it swings in one direction, will push back to go into the other direction as kind of a recoil to some of these rights or these demands or these organizations. We just want to go back to the way it was. Well, Little People of America is a group that's actually dealing with little people. Okay. I will say the word right now. I was always brought up that people that were height challenged were referred to oftentimes as midgets. And I suspect that there could be a number of other terms. I don't know if any of y'all watch Game of Thrones, but boy, the Peter Dinklage character in that show got called all sorts of things as a little person. But LP or little person is the correct term these days. Now, Little People of America as a group organized to represent little people and issues that face little people. Because let's be honest, if you don't think about little people, then you're not going to think about their issues. But if they organize and they've got groups of people, registered voters, information campaigns, well, you're going to have to pay attention. Evidently, they actually made a demand of the broadcast media. And, you notice, I'll just read this sentence off. The advocacy group Little People of America has called on the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, to ban the word midget from broadcast media. Now, Michael Petrozelli, the president of Little People of America, at least the president that was representing them at this point, says it's not acceptable to call people the N word. I suspect y'all know what the N word is. Just as it's not acceptable to call people the M word. In other words, the argument is there are certain groups that have certain words that they don't want to be called, and these words are not allowed on TV. Well, little people don't want to be called the M word. And if you can ban this word over here, then you should be able to ban our word too. Got to be honest. If somebody doesn't want to be called something, I don't want to call someone that. I will say, though, that the N word is such a bad word from such an element of history that we're going to talk a little bit about in this section. Comparing the M word to the N word is a little offensive in some respects. Now, I'm not saying that these folks are wrong by wanting the word banned, but just say, hey, this word bothers us. We don't want y'all to call us this. I don't know that you need to compare it to another word or somebody else's word. I think you just need to, lay it out there because comparing these two words, I don't think you've got the same history, the same vileness, the same violence. The roots are just not as deep for the N word versus the M word. But to their credit, I don't know that you necessarily hear that word very much. Let me scroll over. New York City. I don't know exactly how y'all do it in Oklahoma because I've never been, at the end of year testing in Oklahoma's public schools. But traditionally, in many states, and I assume Oklahoma is part of this, you take those end of grade tests every few years so that you can kind of rate where you are compared to other people, other students that are in the country. Now, you'll notice up here, New York City had one of these kinds of tests too. And what they decided to do, y'all, is they decided to ban words from standardized tests that might evoke unpleasant emotions in students. All right, now, again, there's certain words that you don't say about different groups. And to be honest with you, it's usually not just one word about groups, but it's usually multiple words that can cause some problems. And there are some words that we think about that we just know we're not supposed to say. Then there's other things that can lead to confusion, misunderstanding. Well, let me give you some examples of these words that they banned. They banned words like dancing. They banned words like dinosaurs, and they banned words like birthdays. Now, I remember going to church in North Carolina, and I went, man, I have quit a lot of churches in my day. And I will say that I have gone to some fire and brimstone Baptist churches, the Catholic Church, a number of other things in between, some churches that taught hellfire and some churches that taught love. I bring this up to you because, dancing is kind of a controversial religious word because sometimes the way gyrate could actually evoke some really impure thoughts, if you know what I'm saying. Dinosaurs, at one of those hellfire Baptist churches that I went to, and I'm not saying anything bad about Baptists. I mean, I think they took pride in how hard they were in applying the good book. But, I don't ever remember Adam and Eve getting chased around by Tyrannosaurus Rexes. And they decided to ban the word dinosaurs in New York City because there are some folks, oftentimes biblical fundamentalists, who would in fact say that if there weren't no dinosaurs in the Bible, then there weren't no dinosaurs. And I bring this up to you because basically they're saying we want these kids to go take these tests and not have something that's actually going to be against their beliefs. Now, you might say birthdays. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses do not celebrate birthdays. This is a worldly ceremony, and worldly ceremonies, worldly authorities are not going to be especially high on the belief system of not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but a number of other religious beliefs that are around the world as well. So these things were banned. Now, I'll say this to you. As a little kid, I really liked dinosaurs. And as a grown person, some of these Jurassic Park movies or King Kongs or Godzilla's, the things that they do with these special effects. I mean, I'm just mesmerized. If you gave me a passage about dinosaurs, man, I would kick on that passage because dinosaurs are something that spark my imagination. It's going to keep my interest. But they're taking passages like this out because some people don't are not taught that dinosaurs have ever been on the planet. Now, I'm not saying dinosaurs are or aren't on the planet. Don't misunderstand. But I'm just saying, golly, I'd like to be able to take tests with things that actually provoked my imagination and kept my interest, as opposed to things that were maybe a little bit too general. You'll notice on here they banned other things like Halloween. I don't know how OCC does it, but I know we're coming up on October and things. I know that here in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I used to teach, we did not have Fall Festival. Or, I mean, we did not have Halloween, but we had Fall Festival. So did people sometimes do costumes? Was candy given out? Were there decoration contests and things like this? Carving pumpkins? Yes, 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 yes. We just didn't call it Halloween because of the negative spiritual connotation to it. Junk food, well, no. I'm guessing that we're an obese country. And y'all, I don't know that you can necessarily see it in the videos that I posted. My doctor tells me all the John Brown time, man, you are obese. The only thing I can figure is that they decided to ban junk food from these tests so that they would not continue to promote obesity. But I'm going to be straight with you. I just genuinely don't know. I'll give you a couple of others on here, and bear with me as I give you this one, and just think about this one for just a second. Being tall comes with financial perks. In Western countries, a jump from the 25th percentile of height to the 75th, about 4 or 5 inches, is associated with a 9 to 15% increase in salary. Separate research shows that an extra inch of height is worth $800 more in salary a year. Now, I'm just going to throw this out. Let's say hypothetically that I'm about 5'10, and I think I am about 5'10. When I was in college, well, actually even before college, my first love was 4'11". And she used to get so angry because every time we would go to an R-rated movie, because she was only 4'11", she always got carded. And I'll be straight with you, she was 28 years old. She was still getting freaking carded to go into R-rated movies because she was 4'11". Now, if I'm 5'10" and she's 4'11", that's 11 inches difference in height. This is basically saying that because I'm taller, on using these numbers, 11 inches times $800, I would get roughly almost $9,000 extra a year, which breaks down to about $750 extra per month. That's, a car payment, insurance, gas, cruising, all of it right there. And see, I bring this up to you because you could argue that this is completely discriminatory. You know, Lyndon Johnson, when he was president of the United States, used to give people what were known as the Johnson treatment from time to time. And what he would do, Johnson, and you'll notice that with many American presidents, they are very, very tall. And you don't see short presidents, maybe one or two here and there. But again, TV kind of can minimize that. But the idea is that he would, whether he was in the House, whether he was in the Senate, whether he was the vice president, or eventually as he became the president of the United States, he would call people into his office. He was a tall man. And then he would come down and he would get real close to you, breaking up your personal space. And he would be looking down at you, a position of authority. And he could intimidate people oftentimes to do the things that he needed them to do, and maybe even things that they knew they probably should do, but he could intimidate them because of his presence. Something that I ask students every semester, and I just want you to ponder this because you can't answer it right now. But if you were going to court and your freedom was on the line, would you want a taller attorney? Or would you be comfortable if you went into court with, say, a little person? Now, I want somebody that knows the law. But then again, if you know that the jury, if you know that the judge, if you know that the legal system is going to respond better to a certain person, whether they be the taller person or the person that's less tall, kind of stands to reason you would want to go to court with your freedom on the line with the person that you felt like would give you the best chance to win. And I think it's safe to say that there would be people that would be more inclined to pick the traditional lawyer than maybe, in fact, a little person that's the lawyer. When we talk about this idea of equal treatment, when we talk about this idea of microaggressions, when we talk about this idea of political correctness, y'all, these are the things that we're talking about. Because not everything is the N word. Some things are a lot more subtle. Some things, y'all, are things that if you're not part of a particular group identification, then in fact, you're not going to understand. I understand a little bit about 4'11" because I dated her, but I'm just a middle-aged white guy. Can I speak with clarity on issues for a person of color, issues for, say, a woman, issues for somebody that was transgender, issues for somebody that was Muslim? Well, I'm not part of that group identification. Maybe I can't, as much as maybe I would want to, be able to represent that. Of course, that door swings in the other direction as well. Maybe they cannot speak to the situations that I would encounter because they're not part of my group identifications. So kind of keep that thought in mind. Let me give you one or two more here, and I'll give you this one from Michigan. Again, we're talking about different groups. I don't know how much you've really ever thought about old people. I don't know how much you've really ever thought about, short people. I don't know really how much you've thought about, religious people. But think about this one for just a second. One of the questions, y'all, that I ask every semester when we're in class, if you were placing an ad for a roommate, what would you ask for? You know, you're placing an ad. What are the qualities? What are the characteristics of a roommate that you would want? And to be honest with you, I'll get things sometimes like, hey, I'm a female, I want to live with another female, or I'm a male, I want to live with another male. I've heard people talk about, I want a clean roommate. That seems reasonable on its face, right? A clean roommate. Some people would say, oh, I want a smoker or a non-smoker. I don't want somebody that's got pets. I want somebody to pay the bills. You get the idea. Check this one out from Michigan. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights is investigating a woman who advertised for a Christian roommate. Got to be honest, some of the most serious wars in the history of the world have been fought because of religious differences. And it kind of stands to reason that if somebody was very religious, that it makes sense they would want somebody that they would live with that, in fact, would be very religious as well. If somebody was not very religious by the same token, I could see where maybe they would want to live with somebody that wasn't especially religious. Get it? It works in both directions. But you'll notice on here in Michigan, it says the housing official Nancy Haynes said that while people can choose to live with whomever they want, the woman's ad constituted a discriminatory statement that violates the Fair Housing Act. In other words, by saying that she wanted a Christian roommate, she was basically advertising that she was not going to, live with anybody else. And that technically is discrimination. Now, let me say this, and I don't know if I should necessarily say this to y'all, but you know, when you put something in writing like this, it's hard to refute. Okay. I don't know that saying you want to live with somebody that is a particular religion is all that bad. Just like I don't think that if you say you want to live with somebody of a particular gender or a particular age or somebody that smokes or is a non-smoker, I mean, to me, all of these things kind of lump together. But here's what I'll say to you. When you put it in writing, and if the Michigan Department of Civil Rights decides that, in fact, this is a discriminatory statement, well, you put it in writing. It's going to be really hard to disprove that. When I moved up here to Maryland, I'll never forget. I rented an apartment, a basement apartment from these ladies that were within walking distance of the campus. Never forget this. And I, sent something in. I got an email back from Patricia, and Patricia's like, "Hey, Greg, love to meet you. We got to do a background check." All of this seemed pretty normal. And she said, "Let me give you a call." We exchanged numbers. We talked on the phone. She said, "Greg, why don't you come by today? I'm going to be working late, um, but my partner Gabe is going to be there. And my partner Gabe, I trust implicitly. If you come by and my partner Gabe likes you, I'm sure it's going to be fine with me." This was 15-ish years ago. Coming up here to the fine metropolitan Maryland area from small town North Carolina. Hey, I'm just going to go meet Patty and Gabe. Well, I get there and Well, did you notice what she kept repeating over and over again? She kept repeating, "My partner Gabe, my partner Gabe, my partner Gabe." And while language has changed a little bit over time, y'all, the fact is that maybe 15-ish years or so ago, when you referred to your partner, oftentimes that meant your same-sex partner. When I went to that place looking to meet Gabe, thinking Gabe was a guy, Gabrielle answered the door. And they told me later on, they said, "Greg, we couldn't put in our ad that we wanted somebody who was gay friendly, gay accepting. But what we did is we wanted to see the look on your face when you actually opened the door and saw that Gabe was Gabrielle, because right then we would know what you thought." And from our side of things, we don't want you to be renting in an environment that you're not comfortable in. And we sure as hell don't want renting to you if you are in fact not going to be comfortable with our lifestyle. Was what they did discrimination? Absolutely it was. But I bring this up, y'all, in this context because they didn't put it in writing, which means it's going to be really hard to prove, in fact, that they had done anything wrong. So kind of keep that thought in mind as you go forward on this. The more that you write down, the more that there's a trail. You can legally discriminate, if you will, as long as you don't leave any clues. And sometimes that's actually pretty easy to do. Let me leave you with one more on this. And this one might be my all-time favorite. um, y'all, if there is one state that is a southern state that is in the north, southern state, maybe mindset wise, Delaware is probably that state. Okay. And Delaware came up with something. This is the Delaware Department of Transportation. They came up with something that was known as a racial sensitivity pamphlet or a workplace faux pas pamphlet, things that you're not supposed to say at work. And they actually divided this up, y'all, into group identifications. So things that you're not supposed to say to African American coworkers, things you're not supposed to say to Asian coworkers, things that you're not supposed to say to coworkers with disabilities, things that you're not supposed to say to your older coworkers, and on and on and on and on and on. And they caught 10 kinds of hell because of this pamphlet because it actually seemed a little bit insensitive. So let me give you some examples of some things that they put in there. And these are things that you're not supposed to say. Now, let me say this. If they put it in there because they want to tell you not to say it, it probably means that these were things that were said. So they're trying to kind of hold off or fend off, if you will, potential lawsuits. And basically, hey, look, we told you not to say this. You said it. This is on you, the worker. It's not on us, the Delaware Department of Transportation. Things that you're not supposed to say. You're not supposed to ask a gay coworker whether they've thought about getting help. Oh, you're gay. You thought about getting help for that? No, not supposed to say that. It doesn't say it in the article. You're not supposed to say, "Oh, you're gay. What did your parents say when they found out?" No, no, not supposed to say that. Offering black coworkers fried chicken or watermelon for lunch. Not kidding on this. Things that you're not supposed to say. And understand on this. If you say to someone that is gay, "Oh my God, have you thought about getting help?" You are basically demonstrating a bias. That would be political incorrectness. That would be a microaggression. With that question, you're saying that what they are is wrong. If you go up to a black coworker and offer fried chicken or watermelon, isn't that a stereotype? Now, let me say this, and y'all are probably saying, "Well, fried chicken, watermelon, that's not as bad as some things that could be said." You're right about that. But here's the thing. The idea on this is, and I'll say this point blank. I mean, I grew up in the South. Here in Maryland, I mean, we ain't got good fried chicken to save our lives. If somebody came into work and had good fried chicken and they didn't offer me anything, I think that would be a bigger microaggression than, in fact, offering somebody fried chicken or watermelon. But, let's put it this way. let's say that I go to lunch with two coworkers, and one is a black woman and the other is an Asian man. And we're in line, and both of them look at me and they're like, listen, we're going to go wash our hands before we eat. And we're in line to order, and I'm like, hey, I got you. They got the best fried chicken in the city here. Okay, if you notice, I offered it to both folks. It's probably not going to be a problem. But if I'm at a work party and I come around with a couple of trays and I've got deep fried chicken wings on one tray and I've got egg rolls on the other tray, and I see those same two coworkers and I go to the black woman and I've got, oh my gosh, I've got these wonderful deep fried chicken wings. Or if I go to the Asian man and I was like, man, you look like you are ready for an egg roll. Okay, that's very different because now I've made a judgment. That's a microaggression. Think about this in a different context. Okay. And I don't know what y'all's group identifications are, but think about this for just a second. Has anybody ever come up to you and said, wow, you speak English really well? Okay, now on its face, that's a compliment. And they really may not mean anything by it. But if they come up to you and they say, wow, you speak English well, how in the hell am I supposed to speak English? In a way, they've kind of made a judgment based upon your appearance that maybe they didn't think that you were going to speak English all that well. Maybe, in fact, they would think that you're supposed to speak Spanish or a different language or whatever. So understand when we talk about this idea of microaggressions, when we talk about this idea of biases, I don't necessarily think somebody coming up and saying to you or to anybody that they speak English well is meant to be hateful, but it can be taken the wrong way. And remember, it's not what you mean when you say things, but in fact, it's how it's taken that ultimately is what's important. You'll notice on here, well, actually, let me show you a clip and let me adjust my, juggle my screens here for just a second. Bear with me. Let me show you an example of how this fried chicken comment can go, oh, so wrong. I suspect that some of y'all are familiar with pardon me, Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods is probably, you could argue maybe one of the top three golfers of all time. And Tiger Woods is an interesting story because here you've got this young black man who is incredible at golf, and he's oftentimes playing on courses that have historically been segregated courses. And as you might would imagine, some of the golfers that had been golfing for a while did not especially take very kindly all of the attention that he got. In this clip, Tiger Woods wins the US Open, I think. And they have a policy that when you win the US Open golf tournament, that in fact you get to pick what the opening dinner is the next year. The idea is that you get to celebrate the fact that you won the previous year while kicking off the new tournament. Well, they talked to Fuzzy Zeller, an older white golfer, and listen to what he said. We know that there are certain words that you're not supposed to say. A lot of words, when you use inflection or when you play bias, they can be inappropriate words. And he dropped several in here that are going to fit that description. I'll go ahead and I'll roll this. This is Fuzzy talking about Tiger.
He's doing quite well. Pretty impressive. Little boy's driving it well. He's putting well. He's doing everything it takes to win. So you know what you guys do when he gets in here? Pat him on the back, say congratulations, enjoy it, and tell him not to serve fried chicken next year. Got it. All right. Or collard greens or whatever the hell it's
All right, now I'm going to pause this, and I'm not going to play it again. But understand on this, there were about three things that he said in there. He called Tiger Woods a little boy. Boy by itself is not necessarily a bad word, but if you put this in the context of a white guy like Fuzzy calling Tiger a boy, this is going to be a problem. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Number two, tell him not to serve fried chicken next year or whatever the hell they eat. Yeah, that's what he said. And then he threw in there at the end collard greens. He was making generalizations. He was saying things to be a jerk, quite frankly. And Fuzzy Zeller, even years ago, because this was at the beginning of Tiger's career, Fuzzy Zeller never recovered his career after this because of the negative publicity that he had got. So understand on this. We were talking about that N word before. Yeah, you're not supposed to say that. There are other things that you're not supposed to say too. And let me stress one more time as I close the video. Number one, just because you think it's okay, or just because the majority of the group thinks it's okay, that's not the most important piece. The most important piece is how each individual person takes it. And if so much as one person takes something wrong, y'all, that's the kind of thing that could get somebody in an awful lot of trouble. Be careful with the things that you say, particularly in professional environments. Y'all, I'll stop here. Thank you.